It's okay, we'll get through it. All right. So we are moving on here, talking about another body system. And for the endocrine system, it's related to, so we just finished up with the nervous system. And we know that our nervous system is responsible for taking in information, okay, processing that information, and then responding to that if necessary. The endocrine system is also related to how our body regulates various functions within it. Our endocrine system is linked to our nervous system as well in our brain. And it's another system that helps to regulate things. And so if we talk about the endocrine system, it's a series of what we call glands, okay? Organs within our body that produce hormones. And they send these hormones directly into the bloodstream. And these hormones circulate throughout our whole body in our blood. And they affect various parts of our body in a variety of ways. The name itself, endocrine, okay? Endo means inside. Crine means secretions. So these are secreting hormones inside of our body. And these hormones are proteins. The word hormone means to excite. And hormones are named that because many hormones get our body ready to undergo some task. They're chemical messengers. They're small proteins. And all these dozens of hormones that circulate in our blood, their levels, the amount of these hormones goes up and down depending on whether or not our glands are producing them. Okay? And the levels are controlled by something that we call feedback. This feedback system sort of decides when to turn the glands on and when to turn them off. So to understand how a feedback system works, let's use the analogy of this thermostat. This thermostat over here, each classroom in our school has one of these. Your house has one of these. What is it responsible for controlling? Temperature. Yeah, the temperature of your house, or the temperature of this room. So this would be sort of like an endocrine gland. Now, this thermostat has a sensor in it that senses the temperature of this room. What if the thermostat senses the temperature of this room is dropped too low? What will it do? How? Does heat come pouring out of this to warm the room back up? No. What does it do, actually? Lindsay? Yes. So this is sensing the temperature. When it realizes the temperature is not at the right level, it sends a message through wires that go through the ceiling to the heater in the back of the room. And they tell the heater to do what? Turn on. And so that thermostat sends a message to the heater turns on. What happens to the temperature of the room? It goes up. Once the thermostat senses the temperature has reached the proper level, what does it do then? It sends another message to the heater saying, okay, we're at the right temperature, and the heater turns off. So this thermostat is regulating the temperature of our room, but not by producing heat itself. It's controlling another part of this room that actually makes the heat. So that's sort of how our endocrine glands work. Our endocrine glands are like that thermostat. They send a message to different parts of our body, causing them to turn on or off. and they regulate how our body works in that same sort of way. Okay, by sending, instead of sending an electrical message through wires, they send it through these chemical messengers called hormones. And so this helps our body to maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis means balance, keeping the proper levels, keeping conditions at the right level. So we're going to talk about some of the endocrine glands and what they do, the hormones they produce, how they work. We're not going to get into all of them. There are many endocrine glands. They produce many hormones that work together. Okay, but if you understand sort of how an endocrine gland works in general, you can understand sort of how these things help us regulate our body. So our endocrine system produces these hormones, these chemicals, these proteins. They're produced by various glands that are in different parts of our body. They're sent into the blood by these glands, and then they circulate around our body. Hormones have specific action on various organs, various parts of our body, regulating them. Sometimes they speed up a certain organ. Sometimes they slow it down. Okay? So they can do various things. One really important organ of the endocrine system is the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is way up in your brain. Okay? And the pituitary gland is often called the master gland. Because the pituitary gland itself, it makes a bunch of hormones that regulate other endocrine glands. So it's sort of controlling a whole bunch of other endocrine glands. So it's kind of the master gland. It's really, really tiny. It's only about the size of a pea. Way up inside of your brain is where your pituitary gland is. Okay? And it helps coordinate with our nervous system. One of the hormones it produces, out of many, it produces many different hormones, but one is an interesting one to talk about, called HGH. HGH is the abbreviation for human growth hormone. Human growth hormone is an important hormone, especially for people of your age, not so much people of my age, because human growth hormone is what regulates the elongation of our bones. Okay? You're growing taller, and you've grown taller since you were a child because of the effects of human growth hormone. During ages when you're growing, your pituitary gland produces human growth hormone that circulates through your blood. It acts on your bones, and it tells them basically to grow longer. There are various disorders in which a person may not produce enough human growth hormone. Okay? And that signal doesn't get to their bones telling them to grow larger. That could lead to what's called dwarfism. The lack of reaching a normal height. It's not just being short, okay? It's having a disorder which leads to low growth hormone, which means the person never grows to a normal size. It also, disorders of the pituitary gland can lead to gigantism. Now, normally, our pituitary gland produces growth hormone at certain times during our development. You know, times when you have a growth spurt or you grow a few inches in a year, time when your pituitary gland is kicking in, producing plenty of human growth hormone. Other times in our life it shuts down. In all people, it basically brings down the level of human growth hormone after a person is fully grown. You know, age 17, 18, 19 years old, and a person stops growing. There are cases when a person can have a problem with their pituitary gland. This guy, we'll watch a video about him later. This is Robert Wadlow, the tallest person ever to have lived on Earth and documented. And he had actually a tumor on his pituitary gland that caused it to continuously produce growth hormone throughout all of his life, right until he died. He always was growing. He didn't have like go through big growth spurts. He was constantly growing from the time he was born until the time he died. And we'll learn a little bit about him in a video. You know who this is?
Andre the Giant.
Oh, everyone knows Andre the Giant?
Yeah.
He's an old WWF wrestler.
He was like the best.
Okay. Here you have one of the world's tallest men and one of the world's shortest. Okay. He is 8 feet 11 inches. Okay. This is Robert Wadlow. He was 8 foot 11. This is his father standing next to him. He's 8 foot 11. Here is Mr. Arcuri standing next to a model of Robert Wadlow. Yeah, that's a Ripley Museum. So, we'll watch a little bit of this video. It just tells a little bit about Robert Wadlow. He's a sort of interesting guy. Question, Emily?
You was wondering how they put him in a coffin.
They're going to make a special one for him. All right, so let's watch this. Yes.
There are certain items in the Guinness Book that can only be classified as classic Guinness. Robert Wadlow Jr. is definitely a classic. Although he died in 1940, Robert's record has never been broken. Let's take a look back at the world's tallest man. He was just under 9 feet tall, 8 feet 11 and 1/10 inches. Nearly 2 feet taller than NBA All-Star center Shaquille O'Neal is today. And the world could barely accommodate him.
I had enough to go through all doorways, no room on a bus, no room on a train, no seats, airplane. Everything was made for a person 6 foot or under, even 9 foot.
Robert Wadlow, tallest man ever, born 1918, Alton, Illinois. As his average-sized parents watched in awe, it didn't take long for Robert Wadlow to grow up and up and up. By age 5, he was already 5 feet 4. By 10, he was 6 foot 5 and towered over his teachers.
I went in there to teach, and I still don't remember a single thing I taught, because when Robert walked in there and sat down with those red big old feet sticking out, I kept looking at him. He got out his paper and he put it on the desk. It was a regular notebook-sized paper. He put that great big hand on top to start writing, and I couldn't see the paper anymore.
Robert longed to
Those
be
are kids
normal,
his age.
and except for his size, he was. He even joined the Boy Scouts.
Just a record boy, like any other boy, only larger. His mischievous was just like any other. He'd take your hat and put it up in chandeliers where you couldn't get a hold of it.
He probably wished that he was as tall as he was and wanted a normal life, which he couldn't possibly live.
When he was 12, doctors found he had an overactive pituitary gland, the source of human growth hormones. Corrective surgery was dangerous and not sure to work, so his parents let nature take its course.
I'm about 12 years old and weigh 240 pounds, and I'm about 7 feet tall. These boys look around me, about the same age as I am, they go to the same grade.
2 years later, when he entered high school, he was 7'5" and used to being teased.
And he always took it so well. But in spite of everything, his ears would turn red, and he would shuffle, and he would look terribly embarrassed. But I never did see him appear angry.
His size made him too awkward to play basketball. He had circulation problems in his huge feet and was sometimes ungainly when he walked. Shoes were a problem too. He had to have them custom made. The last pair made for him were size 40.
I remember the largest pair of shoes ever made. When I kick somebody, they stay kicked.
In Alton, Wadlow was well-liked and treated with respect, but elsewhere, he was the object of unwanted attention.
He couldn't go anywhere without being stared at and drawing a crowd. Some people would bother him, because of his height. Well, they might come up behind him and pinch his leg or something else, or maybe even try to kick him, on the shins. Make sure he wasn't on stilts.
His sanctuary was home with his family. His younger brother Harold, the only remaining member of the family, always admired him.
He was the best big brother anybody could ever have. He was a good person, quiet person, loving, caring.
Wadlow never stopped growing. He was 8'4" when he graduated from high school. He then enrolled in college and joined community groups. The Masons had to have a special chair built for him. You get a true sense of Wadlow's immense scale when an average-sized person sits in it. When he was 20 and 8.5 feet tall, Robert Wadlow began doing promotional tours for the company that made his shoes. He may not have enjoyed fame, but he liked traveling and the perks of being on the road.
We do go out on double dates. We go to a theater or a nightclub, usually for dinner and then dancing. Laughed, giggled, we just had a wonderful time. Robert never took advantage of being a popular person and one that was in the limelight. He never uses popularity to take advantage of anyone.
He died in 1940 from a foot infection caused by a metal brace he wore to strengthen his ankles. 5,000 people attended his funeral. It took 12 men to carry his casket. Though Robert Wadlow was only 22 when he died, this gentle giant led a giant life.
He led what I would call an accelerated type of life. He traveled more, saw more, met more people. Political life, sports figures, movie stars. He had more in his short life than what they would do in 2 or 3 lifetimes.
The man Guinness currently lists as the tallest man is Haji Muhammad Alam Chana. This 7'7" 1/4" Pakistani died recently in a New York hospital. The tallest man in the world now is just measured North Korean Michael Rye, who is 7 feet 9 inches. A foot shorter than Robert Wadlow, the basketball-playing Rye is said to be the object of great interest in the NBA.
Yeah, that was an older video. So Robert Wadlow, like they said, so the human body's not really adapted to being that tall. So a person that would grow to that height, obviously they're very tall, but their heart has to work harder to move all that blood around their body. Their joints are under a lot of stress because of their huge size, their huge weight. He had problems with his ankles, so he had to wear like braces around his ankles to help him stand up straight. And at one point he got an infection in his foot. He had problems with circulation, and that infection spread throughout his body, and that's how he died.
Didn't Andre the Giant die because his heart got too much pressure and didn't like?
Could
I think
be.
it was like a heart failure that.
I'm not exactly sure about Andre the Giant. There's a new documentary coming out about Andre the Giant. All right, so pituitary disorders can lead to difficulties in growth. They could also lead to, like we said, dwarfism. Sometimes a person that is an underactive pituitary gland that's not growing to a normal height, they sometimes can be given injections of human growth hormone to help them reach a more normal height. That's something is sometimes done. Our pancreas is another really important endocrine organ because it produces the hormone insulin. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of insulin. Raise your hand if you could tell me, what does insulin do, or what is it related to in our bodies? Does anybody know? Jordan?
Isn't insulin also something to inject?
Some people, who would have to inject themselves with insulin? Kaya? What are you going to say? Kyle? Yeah, person with diabetes. Person with diabetes has a problem usually with their pancreas in that it's not producing this hormone insulin. And insulin is how our body controls what? Blood sugar. Okay? What insulin does when it's released into our bloodstream is it lowers our blood sugar. It's very important in our bodies to have the proper level of blood glucose, blood sugar. Our cells need glucose for respiration. If they don't have enough of it, then the cells don't get enough energy. If there's too much insulin, I mean, if there's too much glucose in the blood, that's also dangerous. It damages our kidneys, it can damage nerves. So it's important to have the right level. In a normal person without diabetes, their pancreas is constantly monitoring their blood sugar and making adjustments, releasing insulin to keep it at the right level. The way this works is, let's say this morning you had 3 Pop-Tarts for breakfast. Mostly, what is in a Pop-Tart? Sugar. So let's say somebody eats Pop-Tarts for breakfast. They, right now, as those Pop-Tarts are digesting, it's sending a rush of sugar into their blood. Their blood glucose level is going way up. So what happens is their pancreas is keeping track of it. And so the pancreas realizes the blood glucose level has gotten too high, too much sugar in the blood, it could be dangerous. So the pancreas turns on, and it produces insulin. And it pumps it into our blood. Insulin is just a hormone. And this hormone, what it does is when it reaches cells of our certain parts of our body, such as our liver, it tells them basically, hey, too much glucose in our blood, you need to get rid of some. And so our cells take in glucose, and therefore our blood glucose level does what? Goes back down, because our liver's taking it out of our blood, storing it, our blood glucose level goes down. And so our pancreas then realizes it, says, okay, we're back at a proper level, shuts off the production of insulin because our blood sugar levels reached the proper level. And so insulin stopped being produced. Until what? Until it happens again. Until we go to lunch and eat one of those ice cream sandwiches and somebody bought us in the cafeteria, and then our blood sugar level starts going up again, and our pancreas turns back on, says, okay, too much sugar in the blood, need to bring it back down. There's also another hormone that does the opposite. If our blood sugar level goes too low, it kicks in. We're not going to get into the details of that, but another hormone does the opposite. So these hormones work together to constantly maintain the proper amount of glucose in our blood. Now you guys mentioned earlier diabetes. So sometimes a person's pancreas doesn't work properly. It doesn't produce insulin. So probably many of you may know somebody that's diabetic. Friends, somebody in your family, because it's fairly common. And a person that's diabetic, what do they have to monitor?
How much sugar they're intaking.
Well, they might monitor their intake, but also, yeah, they test their own blood glucose oftentimes, where they poke their finger with a little drop of blood, put it on a test strip, put it in a little machine, it tells them what their blood glucose level is, and that allows them to know if it's the right level. If the level's not correct and it's too high, they can give themselves insulin. Okay, their pancreas isn't making insulin, but they can inject themselves with insulin to bring their blood sugar level back down. Now some people do it manually like that. Test their blood sugar manually, give themselves an injection. Other people might have an insulin pump, a tiny little sort of machine, looks like the size of a cell phone that they wear. It has a little tube which connects to a pad that goes on their skin, and this little machine monitors their blood sugar level, and they can give themselves insulin by making adjustments on this little machine that pumps insulin into their body tissue. So it's another way. Some people have a pod. They might wear, like on their arm, a little pod thing that gives them insulin in that way. They're also on the horizon are inhalable, like an asthma inhaler, but where you would be absorbing insulin rather than asthma medication. So there's different ways people have of monitoring and keeping track of their blood glucose levels, but basically they need to keep track of it because their pancreas isn't doing that job. Couple other endocrine glands. Adrenal glands. These are like two little hats that sit on top of our kidneys. And they produce a hormone that you probably have heard of called what? Adrenal Adrenaline.
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline is a stress hormone. The word adrenal means near the kidneys because of these little hats on top of our kidneys. And they produce adrenaline. What does adrenaline do?
Wait, doesn't it like kick in so you go like faster?
Yeah.
When you're running?
It starts what's called the fight or flight response. It's a hormone that our adrenal glands start producing if we're in some threatening situation. And this is an adaptation to allow us to escape danger or to confront danger. So if you go home after school and your little brother's waiting in the closet and jumps out and scares you really bad, and you have that feeling where your heart starts racing, your stomach feels weird, that feeling is because of the effects of adrenaline. Being scared like that causes your adrenal glands to kick in to release adrenaline. Because you got scared, your body's ready to fight or to run away. Okay? So that's what the purpose of our adrenal glands is. We also have along our trachea, near our windpipe, a gland called the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland, it looks like a bow tie around our windpipe. And it's responsible for regulating our metabolism, how our body uses energy. There are various disorders of an underactive thyroid gland or an overactive thyroid gland. If it's underactive and not producing enough of its hormones, it means a person may tend to gain weight very easily, okay, because their thyroid gland is underactive. If a person has an overactive thyroid gland, it may mean they have difficulty maintaining a normal body weight, and they may burn energy very, very quickly. And it can swell up when there's problems with it, forming what's called a goiter. And then finally, the last endocrine glands. We will talk more about the testes and ovaries as we get to the human reproductive system. But besides producing reproductive cells, gametes, sperm and egg cells, the testes and ovaries also produce hormones. Okay? And the hormones produced by the testes is called testosterone. It's the male sex hormone. The testes also produce sperm cells. We'll get to that at the end of this unit. And testosterone is a hormone which is responsible for the development of what's called male secondary sex characteristics. Secondary sex characteristics are the things we would think of as typically male characteristics. A deeper voice, increased facial hair, for example, increased muscle mass. Okay? Those are what the effects of testosterone are on the body. In females, the endocrine gland is called the ovaries. Ovaries release the female sex hormone, which is called estrogen. It says release estrogen. The ovaries also produce eggs, and they're responsible for the development of secondary female sex characteristics. Things like changes to the pelvis, regulation of the reproductive cycle, breast development. Those are secondary female sex characteristics. Now, interesting fact is that males produce estrogen in their bodies as well, even though they don't have ovaries. Females produce testosterone in their bodies, even though they don't have testes. They're produced in other parts of the body, but both males and females have varying amounts of the other sex hormones. Eventually. For now, we're going to stop there. Any questions about endocrine system?